of despair, these families have been displaced multiple times, and now that they may well be forced to move again. Hind al-Khudri, Al Jazeera.
2 people have been wounded in a stabbing attack at an Israeli checkpoint near occupied East Jerusalem. The alleged assailant was shot dead by Israeli forces at the scene. Well, the Israeli military then raided the alleged attacker's home in the neighborhood of Jabal al-Mukaber in occupied East Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cancelled a war cabinet meeting meant to discuss the post-war plan for Gaza. He's been facing growing criticism from members of his own cabinet over talks for the day after in Gaza. Far-right members of the ruling coalition have announced they'll be holding their own meeting in protest over their planned exclusion from the discussions. Well, Alan Fisher joins us live now from occupied East Jerusalem. Alan, so this Israeli war cabinet meeting was cancelled at very short notice. What is this telling us, Alan?
OK, let's remind ourselves, there's a war cabinet, 3-man war cabinet, there's the wider security cabinet, and then there is the full political cabinet. The war cabinet was due to meet. What were they meant to talk about? Well, the deal that is being discussed with Hamas, the Israelis, being negotiated by the Egyptians, the Qataris and the Americans about the exchange of captives in Gaza for prisoners being held in Israeli jails that are Palestinian. Now, that seems relatively uncontroversial, and Benjamin Netanyahu told the families of those being held captive in a meeting on Thursday afternoon that negotiations are still ongoing. The second thing that was going to be discussed at the war cabinet was what Gaza looks like the day after the war. But that's why Benjamin Netanyahu cancelled it, because one of his political cabinet, one of his allies in the coalition government, Bezalel Smotrich, decided that he didn't want that discussion to take place. He is very much against the Palestinian Authority having any role in Gaza after the war. He's very much against transferring any money to the Palestinian Authority, as the Americans have been urging. And so under that pressure, Benjamin Netanyahu decided that the war cabinet would not have any discussions about this. Instead, he would leave it to the wider security cabinet, which is going to take place, we're told, on Tuesday. But it shows the internal pressure that Benjamin Netanyahu is under. He knows that there has to be a plan drawn up for Gaza the day after. He's under pressure from internal security service, from the Israeli army, and also from the Americans to have a plan in place. But he cancelled it because he was worried that it could fracture his coalition, could fracture his government, and would mean that his position as Prime Minister would be at risk.
And Alan, away from those political divisions, what more details are now emerging about that stabbing incident in occupied East Jerusalem?
This happened last night. A young 23-year-old Palestinian man allegedly stabbed 2 Israeli police officers / army at a checkpoint at Jabal Mukaber, which is on the edge of occupied East Jerusalem. One of those who was stabbed is in a serious condition in hospital. The other one was wounded. The 23-year-old man was shot dead at the scene. The Israeli army then went to the house and arrested the mother, the father and the sister of the young man. Now, they'll be held for questioning, essentially asking them, did you know about this? What did you know about this? And if you did know about it, why didn't you tell us? More often than not, they're completely in the dark as well. The house was ransacked. But this is a controversial policy because essentially this is seen as collective punishment for the family because of what someone did. There is also the possibility that the house might be demolished. That will be a decision taken by the courts. But again, this is the idea of collective punishment, which has been criticised by many human rights organisations, that if someone in your family does something wrong, then the whole family suffers as well. It's still got to go through the courts, as I say. But the Israelis take this collective punishment idea because they believe it acts as a deterrent to stop these sort of attacks. But the reality and the evidence proves that it really doesn't.
All right, Alan Fisher live for us there in occupied East Jerusalem. Alan, thank you. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has continued carrying out overnight raids across the